We have suffered at each other's hands. We have lost people we love at each other's hands.
Okay, you can hear that? You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, now I'm gonna do it for real now. Okay. Game of Thrones, Ice and Firecast, Game of Thrones podcast, episode 20. Here we go.
We have suffered at each other's hands. We have lost people we love at each other's hands.
This isn't about noble houses. This is about the living and the dead.
And I intend to stay amongst the living.
I offer you a choice. Bend the knee and join me, or refuse and die.
She is here to reclaim the Seven Kingdoms. The North is one of those Seven Kingdoms.
The Night King's army grows larger by the day. We need allies, powerful allies.
The monsters are real. Dragons, White Walkers, Dothraki Screamers. Let the monsters kill each other. We will deal with whatever is left.
We are going to destroy the Night King and his army. We'll do it together.
He pledged to fight for Daenerys Targaryen. Bent the knee.
He needs to know the truth. Jon isn't really my father's son. He's the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and my aunt Lyanna Stark. He's the heir to the Iron Throne. We need to tell him.
Same thing is coming for all of us. And it is here.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Ice and Firecast, a Game of Thrones podcast. I am one of your hosts, John Perez, alongside the resident maester, Maxwell Bennett. Max, how's it going, dude?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I am very good. Did you enjoy that little intro sequence we had there?
Yeah, I can see now why you were up all night preparing for the episode.
Yeah. We are ready. We got over 10 pages of show notes and facts and a bunch of awesome things. I hope you guys enjoy. If you are new to the show, welcome. We are the Ice and Firecast, a Game of Thrones podcast, a weekly Game of Thrones podcast where we do reviews and look into the futures and a bunch of different things for the Game of Thrones show on HBO. So we truly appreciate it. Guys, if you like anything here on the show, please go to Apple Podcasts where give us a 5-star review. Much appreciated. We're also on SoundCloud. Give it a like and a share. We're also on Twitter at Ice and Firecast. We did our basically we tried to do a spoiler-free review on Monday, right, Max? Is that right? So this one, so basically how it works is the spoiler-free review will be out on Mondays, and the big review, which the spoiler-free review is about 20-30 minutes long. This one probably closer to an hour. This is the big one. This is the spoiler heavy review. So how are you feeling about finally talking about the episode in a way that's, I think, exciting?
Oh, I'm excited. Yeah, and I remember on Monday when we were recording, it was a little tough because it was like like something would pop up and it'd be like, oh, let's tug on that thread. But it's like, no, we gotta wait. We can't dive too far into it.
Right.
So I've been looking forward to this episode.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. Because I can even sense it from you that there were so many moments where you wanted to dive deep into a lot of different topics, and I could sense that you kind of held back, which is good, because we have these 2 separate episodes. This episode, guys, is a review of episode 1 of season 8, the final season of Game of Thrones, which is kind of bittersweet in a lot of ways. We talked about it on Monday, Max, but just kind of if you didn't listen to the episode on Monday, maybe you just wait for the episodes for Fridays, which is the big ones. Max, how are you feeling about the last season, real quick?
Yeah, same feeling as Mondays. It's just it is, like you said, it's bittersweet. I'm excited to see how this all comes together. Obviously we're outside what the books have been for a while, so it's all new to everyone who's watching except for DB and David. And maybe George R.R. I don't know. I don't know if he knows how it's gonna end. But yeah, but on the other hand, it's sad. It's been it's been 9 years worth of TV that's been like sort of been a staple of Sunday nights in the spring and fall or whatever. And so yeah, it's tough. It's like you want it to end, you want to see the conclusion, but on the other hand, once it's over, it's over. And then hope that the spin-off series that HBO is working on kind of fills the gap.
You asked me what we'll be doing after the season, and probably that, right? We'll probably do some reviews of that.
Yeah, I think they've got 2 shows lined up.
Okay. Do you know when that's supposed to come out?
I don't. My guess is that they're probably next year at the earliest, but I haven't really. All I know, and even this, I say this without a whole lot of confidence, is that I think some of it is supposed to focus on Robert's Rebellion, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if that's a fan theory or if it's actually been confirmed.
I kind of hope they dive into Robert's Rebellion, because I think that would be awesome, and the assets are there. The only problem is the mystery is kind of already solved. It would just be like a spectacle at that point in terms of the Robert's Rebellion, because most of it is solved. And actually, that leads me to kind of a question. Just because we're more of a conversational podcast, even though we kind of have a set timeline we go through, but I really wish they dove in. I wish the show dove into what made the Mad King mad, because I always had the theory of Bran doing to the Night King what he did to Hodor, and that's what created the Mad King to be mad.
That would be an interesting one. I mean, if we go with 0 evidence to suggest anything that happened, we do have, and I'll just, obviously, like you said, there's spoilers, so I'll just give you everyone listening one last warning. Now that Jaime's in Winterfell, and we saw in the previews for next week that at some point he's hauled before the Starks and Daenerys, that would be an interesting moment for Bran to sort of do his thing and go back and look, and that's what causes it. Although it would feel a little like it would be really cool, but then on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know how I would react from like a storytelling point of view, if it'd be something that I'd be like really excited about. But we have seen that happen, and we know that it's a thing within the universe that he can kind of screw people up like that.
I just think there's not enough time for any of this. To borrow a sentence from Bran, we don't have time for any of this.
Yeah, and those flashbacks were primarily in season 6, I think, which was a full 10 episode order.
If they were to do it would have to be last season because season 6 was Hold the Door, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
and season 7 was last season, obviously. So they should have done it last season. But so there's a bunch of different things I feel like they could have done, and now it's just too late to do them. Like, it literally is too late. Like I don't personally know where the show is going to go after, because you have to think, Max, the Night King is coming, right? There's going to be a big battle between the living and the dead, and therefore there's probably going to be an aftermath, with the living probably winning. That's my guess. Of course, like I don't know if you're a team Ramsey Bolton, you haven't been paying attention. This isn't going to end well, right?
Although as Yara said, remember, what is dead may never die.
Yeah.
When her brother was like, "Yo, I'm gonna go fight some dead people," and she was like, "Remember."
But she just said, "Kill the bastards," anyway.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Last warning here. We are talking about adult content. Therefore, this might not be suited for under 18 or whatever. I don't know. Rated R, 18, I guess. And also heavy spoilers this episode. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, or maybe you want to not get into super book, we sometimes we get to book stuff too, which is great. This is your last warning from some spoilers. All right, so a little bit of factoids about the show. This is the 68th episode of Game of Thrones. 68. I felt like there was more, but this one tells me it was the 68th, so not too bad. Not too bad of a show. It was written by Dave Hill, which you can probably look up his IMDb. I haven't. I forgot, or I did not for him. I think he wrote a bunch of different episodes previously. I just forgot who they are. It was also directed by David Nutter, who is directing episodes 1, 2, and 4. So he did Winterfell. He's doing next week's episode, and he is directing the episode after the battle for Winterfell, which is interesting because that's half the season. His most famous episodes were the Red Wedding episode, which will go down in probably, I would say, top 3, top 5 Game of Thrones moments of all time. And he also did Mother's Mercy, which is the shame meme, where we get that one.
So I just looked him up real quick.
Yeah.
Just so Winterfell, the 68th episode was actually the first one that he was the lead writer on.
Oh, cool.
And then he's written, it looks like 11. He's been involved with 11 other episodes, and then looks like it's kind of funny looking at it. It looks like he worked his way up through Game of Thrones. He started as an assistant back when the show first came out.
That's incredible.
And has worked his way up.
Oh, that's so good. Congratulations for let's just do a round of applause for Dave Hill and David Nutter. Honestly, having the first episode back, what an episode. It wasn't, I think, the bombshell we all maybe expected, but it really did set the tone, and I was super happy with it. Game of Thrones, if you weren't sure, is one of the most, if not the most popular television show in the history of television. The first episode averaged 17.4 million viewers, up from 16.1 from the season 7 finale. So,
and is that just like the East Coast showing, or is that like?
I feel like that's total, but yeah, I mean, I don't even know if that number includes like streaming, like HBO Go and HBO Now apps. I don't know, but yeah, that is a number right there. Okay, welcome to our first segment. So I do have segments on the show, which is kind of a brand new thing. This segment I call Send a Raven, which is basically more factoids into the episode. So just a couple facts about the episode, and hang in there with us. Due to concerns about spoilers, HBO is only releasing the season 8 titles when they come out, meaning Game of Thrones can only make up accurate episode titles for each one after they were revealed. How do you feel about that? Like, I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I was one of those people that I kind of unintentionally spoiled some of season 7. So I was like, well, I know part of it, so I might as well just look it all up. I didn't like the whole idea of like knowing what's little bits and pieces. They definitely learned their lesson from that episode.
Yeah.
Oh, my little hot still.
Yeah.
Let me turn that down a little bit.
No worries.
So they've in the last 2 years, I think I read somewhere that they like actually hired on like a security team to like actually help keep things secret. But I mean, I think I think the more that they can do to sort of limit how much gets out about the season, the better. Like we just saw that there was endgame leaks, and thankfully the ending wasn't leaked, but some cool reveals were in there. So I think to kind of whatever they could do to maintain the integrity of kind of the mystery is awesome.
Sure. I mean, I like it. I think that it's just good. Like, to not. I mean, I don't know. There's some people in the world, to quote another movie, The Dark Knight, that just want to see the world burn, right? In terms of spoilers, right? And I think the closer they have their cards to their chest, I think it's good. It's good. It's for the good of the realm. You know what I mean? So I like it. This is the first season premiere that began without a cold open. Most season premieres open with an opening of sorts. A prologue scene before the main credits roll. Instead, it just began opening credits like regular episodes. Showrunners Benioff and Weiss have said that they have combined 13 episodes of season 7 and 8 as one big season, splitting in half across 2 airing cycles, which is kind of cool, and it kind of makes sense for the fact of this really is a continuation of what was going on last season.
And it makes sense because I think, within the books, the time span is months. Even in some cases, like I think spans almost like years in a sense. Particularly some of the earlier books with sort of there's not like a time jump sort of thing, but it's implied that like wars have been fought for a long time, even if you're not in every single battle. So it makes sense that in this case, that time frame is being compressed a lot by the events that are happening. Is like the Night King's finally making his move, and so you can't just have him wandering around for multiple episodes.
Sure.
So I mean, it makes sense to me, and that's kind of, I think that's the best way to view it. And even within this season, I'm sort of viewing it as like 2 parts, where you've got episodes 1 through 3, which is, from what I can tell, is primarily in Winterfell, and then there's 4 through 6, which I don't think we've seen anything from.
Sure. No, it makes sense. Yeah. And by the way, shout out to Game of Thrones Wiki, which is I got most of these facts from, so shout out to them. The title sequence, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, has been drastically updated more than in the past 7 seasons, as a production team explained. In prior seasons, as a rule, the camera had to show at least 4 locations: King's Landing, Winterfell, the Wall, and wherever Daenerys is at now in the Eastern Continent. Even in the episodes which Daenerys' storyline does not appear in order to illustrate the full scale of their fantasy world. When Daenerys arrives in Westeros in Season 7, the map thus didn't travel beyond Westeros. Also, due to time constraints, the map sequence is never shown more than 6 locations in one episode. The new opening sequence plays out like an invasion map for the White Walkers, with the entire map upside down to show the view of the White Walkers as they advance south. With so few locations this season due to characters being grouped together again, the only locations shown are the Wall, now breached, Glass Hearth, Winterfell, and King's Landing. The individual animations for the Winterfell and King's Landing are also now far more extensive, showing the interiors of the fortresses for the first time, which is absolutely awesome. Even the astrolable, the map has been updated. The idea is the map sequence is the strollable of a maester in the Citadel, the illustrations on the bars, which prior seasons depicted the doom of Valeria and Robert's rebellion. The new map contains, or they call it, I guess it's strollable, right? The astrobe thing. Artistic depiction of more recent events within the TV show, such as the Red Wedding, the Wall being breached, and Daenerys hatching her dragons. So this new title sequence, man, we talked about it in our spoiler-free episode, but it is really something to see. It's so good.
Yeah, I was because I think it opened with the broken wall, and I was like, oh, that's cool, they showed it, and then it was just like totally different, and I was like, whoa, and like my wife was like, oh, cool, and I'm like look at all the different stuff it's showing, and she was not as impressed as I was, but
oh, cool, are you kidding me? This is amazing.
Yeah, I'm like she was on her phone still looking at something. I'm like, dude, the opening credits is totally different.
Yeah,
she was not buying it.
It is so cool what they did with the opening sequence. I have never seen anything like that where they just completely upgraded it, I guess, in a way. But it was just a cool spectacle. See, I said this in the spoiler-free review that I had a double take so hard because I almost took that opening sequence for granted because I thought it would honestly be the same. So couple more facts here. Star Wars creator George Lucas visited the Winterfell set during the filming of this episode, specifically during the opening arrival of Jon and Dany with her army. Benioff and Weiss have been contracted to write new movies in the set of the Star Wars universe, and they were surprised to hear that Lucas was interested in a set visit. Lucas even sat in the director's booth with David Nutter while filming. Lucas didn't give any directions himself, but would compliment the cast between takes. I thought that was a really cool factoid, by the way.
Yeah, I saw that pop up, which was, and yeah, although I saw, of course, a lot of snarky comments about from people who are not as impressed with the first episode
Boo.
about his presence.
This is on the Free Folk Reddit right here.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, I think say what you will about Lucas and the prequels. Shout out to prequel memes.
Shout out to the homie Jar Jar Binks, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I saw him. He got a round of applause at the Star Wars celebration last week, which was cool.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's cool. Like, he's, love him or hate him, he's instrumental in probably bringing a lot of the sort of maybe opening the door to this kind of nerd culture, I guess you could say, back in the 80s. Of like, he brought Star Wars, and for the longest time, I think there was like the pop culture side of it, and then the nerd culture, and now it's just sort of like, now it's almost weird if you don't like Star Wars. It's like, what? And I think a lot of the success of shows like Game of Thrones and The Expanse and other kind of more hard fantasy sci-fi could probably be traced back to that.
Yeah, sure, makes sense. Definitely bringing nerd culture and kind of everything that goes with nerd culture into the mainstream, and we have to thank, I think, George Lucas a big part of that. I mean, Game of Thrones is so big. It's like it's one of the nerdiest shows I've ever seen, but it's so good though. Gilly does not. So this is. I remember last week you brought this up as well. I think your friend asked you. Gilly does not appear in the episode, though is referred to name. But Brienne and Podrick only briefly appear in the background with no dialogue. So for those asking if Podrick and Brienne, where were they? They were in the show. They were in the episode. I caught them in the background when I watched it again last night, which is no dialogue. So I thought that was good to know. The only person we're missing, I think, is Ghost. Where is Ghost?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
elephants.
Where's the CG budget? I think is the answer to where's Ghost. Unfortunately.
And I thought this was an awesome factoid, and I added this myself. Actor from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia makes season 1 1 second cameo on the ship as one of the guards who was guarding Yara. I forget the actor's name and the person from It's Always Sunny, but I thought that was really cool.
Was it Danny DeVito?
No, it was not Danny DeVito. But okay, let's get into the episode here. Just overall thoughts on the episode, Max.
Yeah, I mean, same as what I was saying on Monday. I thought it was a strong premiere. I think the extra challenge of having to get us up to speed after almost 2 years off. Like, I think there's only so much they could do in terms of like just jumping right into it, and I think they balanced it really well. Of here's what everyone's doing, but like let's keep moving the story forward, because I do think that's sort of been a little bit of an issue with previous season premieres, where you're just sort of like, like, couldn't we have done this in like 20 minutes and like get going? Where and I think some people were actually complaining it felt like they moved too quick to like we had a lot of reunions, but it didn't feel like we lingered on any of them too long. But I think just knowing the time constraints and sort of the bigger things that are coming, I was fine with it. So, yeah. I mean, overall, like, I would just say I'd give it a B. Like, okay. I think it's not one that's going to rank up there with Battle of the Bastards or anything like that. But like, it was just solid. Like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, for sure. I would also, I mean, I totally agree. I think that it wasn't the bombshell that I think we maybe were expecting. I think if you tempered your expectations, it was a very good episode. If you were expecting Battle of the Bastards or Winds of Winterfell or Hardhome, it maybe fell short of that hypeness. But I'm gonna kind of reiterate what I said in the spoiler-free review. I believe that it was an awesome episode and a lot of harkening back to early previous seasons, like season 1, season 2, season 3, the pacing, the scope, the scale, the production. I thought it was awesome. Like I actually really liked the character development in this episode. And yeah, it's not, we didn't get a chance to, I think, stay with a bunch of characters and reunions for if if we had more seasons to go. I think we definitely could have explored those reunions and those conversations more. But with the time constraints, I'm totally fine with, I think, the pace of the show. So, yeah, and I like the episode. You gave it a B. I'd probably give it a A-. Like, it's not an A+, but I thought it was a really well done episode. But again, I'm pretty biased when it comes to Game of Thrones episodes. So the only episodes I didn't like were like season 5 Game of Thrones episodes. So okay, let's get to the segment I call the King's Road, which is basically kind of going through the episode chronologically, talking about the scenes, talking about the characters, talking about the conversations, everything with the episode. It's time for Roll the Clip. Say it with me, Max, 3 times. Roll the clip.
Roll the clip.
Roll the clip. Roll the clip.
Roll the clip.
Queen Daenerys of House Targaryen. Sister Stark, the Lady of Winterfell.
Thank you for inviting us into your home, ladies. The North is as beautiful as your brother claimed. As are you.
Winterfell is yours, Your Grace.
We don't have time for all this. The Night King has your dragon. He's one of them now. The wall has fallen. The dead march south.
All right, we start off in Winterfell. We have Daenerys and her army of Dothraki and Unsullied and her dragons riding into Winterfell. Daenerys Targaryen is traveling north for the first time. Some tidbits about this scene: she's never had a cold weather scene before. The cast pointed out in the behind-the-scenes feature that this is actually the first time that Emilia Clarke visited TV show shooting locations in Iceland. Kit Harington said he enjoyed the chance to show her the stunning natural beauty of the natural parks they were allowed to film there. Also, Queen Daenerys' arrival in Winterfell includes several parallels to King Robert Baratheon's arrival in the first episode of the TV series, which, again, like I said, was just an awesome callback. It has the same music. I don't know if you caught that, Max. They had the same exact music soundtrack that was playing in episode 1 with her. Moreover, in this episode, Arya was the little girl scrambling up the cart to get a better view of the royal party arriving. In this episode, Arya steps aside to let a little boy climb up a tree to get a better look at Daenerys' royal party, as she once did, which was cool. Yeah, I mean, we have the scene. We have Dothraki and Unsullied, Queen Daenerys and Jon, and of course her dragons coming in. I don't know. Like, I thought it was an awesome opening sequence there. It really showed you the scope and scale of Dany and her army, which we've seen before, but being able to see them in the north was a really cool spectacle.
Yeah, and it's interesting looking at it in the perspective of who else is who else is already there. We've had the Knights of the Vale who've been there for a couple weeks or months. And, we've got all these other kind of like the wildlings are still somewhere. We haven't really seen them too much, but we know that they're there.
I saw them. Oh, no. I was going to say, I thought I saw them in Winterfell, but I don't think so, actually.
So we've got them, and then we've got all the other northern houses. So like, I can understand, and I think it's something we'll probably get into in a little bit. Is like it's amazing to see the Unsullied arrive, but on the other hand, it's like I can understand where some of the Winterfell residents are sort of like, ugh, like it feels like we need them, but it's also almost feels like an invasion of there's tens of thousands of soldiers who are just sort of hanging out more or less, waiting for this other army to come that I'm sure some people aren't 100% sure exists. And this is the third, and before that we would have had Stannis' army, and we also had whatever John Ramsey Ramsey Bolton.
Yeah.
I don't know where John Ramsey came from.
No, it's okay.
Ramsey Bolton put together for his little whatever he was doing. So it's probably definitely another big, it's probably mixed feelings for a lot of the people there, understandably.
Yeah, sure. One cool tidbit about Danny's army is if you notice that the Dothraki warriors they're wearing like basically like their normal garb but a little warmer. With Lannister, they had Lannister style coats because in season 7 when they evaded what's it called, when they evaded Casterly Rock and the loot train, remember that? They were able to get some winter clothing, which is good because they would be freezing very much. So, yeah, I mean, it starts off with Danny meeting the Stark family, Arya minus Arya, and she meets Sansa, and Sansa, of course, is very not impressed, or she might be impressed, but she's not Team Danny just yet. And then Bran, of course, cuts the in a very, now he's a meme, which is great if you've seen the memes already, but cuts the tension and cuts the awkwardness with we don't have time for this. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, what do you have to like? What are your thoughts about? I think one big question I have is how is this all going to come together? You know, I personally think it's going to get worse because we're going to find out the news with Jon being the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. And I'm not positive that I think the North ends up being part of Team Danny. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was thinking about this before we jumped on. We know we've set up the conflict where Sansa's sort of sitting there saying, she's seen one brother, she's seen her father, her brother, her mother, and another brother all killed. Mm-hmm. Although in Rickon's case, it was more just because he was a hostage. And she thought she helped get Jon into power as another king in the North. And then he comes back and brings Daenerys back, and he's like, "Oh, BT Dubs, like, I just kind of swore our house to a Targaryen." And I can see where she's sort of saying, like, I'm wanting to take control of the situation and sort of, almost like a live or die. I want to do what's best for the Starks.
Yeah.
And then the North, kind of in that order. Whereas I think Jon is coming at it from the perspective of, I've literally fought and died fighting the dead, and I don't really care about that anymore. Like, they're important to me. I love my family and all that, but that's not the most important thing. And then you have Daenerys in there who sees the army of the dead as a barrier to her ultimate goal of getting on the Iron Throne. So you have 3 different motivations, and I don't know. We've set up the conflict, and I don't know how it gets resolved. And my feeling, my gut is, I think it gets worse and then gets better. But
of course.
Yeah, the big wild card is that the whole revelation at the end of the episode of Jon being Aegon, and I don't know, like, which way does that push, or does it further isolate Sansa from Jon, or does it sort of show her a path to
him being on the Iron Throne?
Yeah. Basically, this is our way to leapfrog everyone, and basically we can then claim kind of authority over everyone. So
yeah, I mean, the one thing that I was thinking of is just Jon being such an honorable man, Jon being such a, I don't want this power. I've never wanted it. I never wanted the responsibility of being the king of the North. I've never wanted the responsibility of leading the wildlings. I never wanted the responsibility of being Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Someone who is just almost, in a way, I would rather be a little bit of a follower than the leader. A royal follower, a loyal follower, an honorable follower. But now he has this news. And I can't help but think that he knows the responsibility of this news. One of the things that I was thinking about is just the fact that he might not want to be king of the Iron Throne, you know, and where that leads, where that's going to lead. Now, I think he will end up having to do it because I think Sansa will talk to him. I think the North knows that the best person for the throne is Jon. And even though Jon is a Targaryen, he is a Stark as well. And for all intents and purposes, his father is Ned Stark. His place of birth, his place of residency, the place he grew up is the North. And so he is still loyal. I don't think the news changes. What I'm trying to say is I don't think the news changes the fact that Jon is a Northerner at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the news will just change his opinion about the North. Oh, I'm a Targaryen. I'm the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark. Forget the North. I'm going for the. I don't think he's going to do that. I think there's going to be some sort of transition of where he's going to realize I'm the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. I am the son of Lyanna Stark. I am the true heir to the Iron Throne. What's best for Westeros? What's best for the North? What's safer for the North? What's safer for the throne? What's safer? Not safer. What's for the good of the realm is Jon being on that throne more than anyone else. Now, I think Dany would make a great queen. I think she's got a. I think the show keeps telling us that she's not like her father, but I think she's like her father in a lot of different ways. And they keep hinting at it. We have a conversation later with Sam, and in the crypt with Jon, and he says, you once gave up your crown, to bend the knee. Do you think Dany would do the same? They keep hinting at like who's better for this whole thing. I think the interesting part is how is it going to happen, but I do believe in the end that Jon will be, at least a card in a huge card in getting to the Iron Throne. But who knows? It'll be. I think that's the interesting part about the entire season.
And it's such an interesting like dichotomy with his character. Is sort of he embodies some of the Stark and some of the Targaryen. It's the Stark side is that sort of that stoic responsibility of feeling like like duty more, like he's loyal to just whatever cause or whatever he's doing, almost to a fault. But then on the other hand, like you sort of see that hot-headedness of like he sees Rickon get killed and he decides to go charge an entire battle line,
right?
Like
right.
So I think it's an interesting, you see both sides of it. And I have other thoughts, but it relates to the discussion on the wall with some secondary characters. But I think it's an interesting. I think he does his duty to the realm, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
He views it differently than Dany would of sort of the idea of being queen. I think in her mind, protecting the realm is becoming queen.
Yeah.
And I don't think he views that same, the end goal for him. He has there's a different means to get there.
Yeah, I mostly agree with you. I just think that Jon, I really do think that Jon will come to a realization that if we want life to win, quote unquote, versus the dead, obviously, then I think he might come to a realization of what's best for the North, what's best for the realm, what's best for life, and I think he's going to come to the realization that Dany might not be best for life. Dany might not be the best for the throne. And I have this opportunity to do what's best for the realm. Now, it just goes to say, like, he might not take it. Like, he might not take it, just because he might truly believe that Dany is the best for it. And I don't know. I think that's the most interesting, conundrum of the show right now, other than the dead advancing in the south, but that's pretty straightforward. I think one of the biggest conundrums and the biggest interesting things that's happening in the show right now is how will everyone take the news, including Dany? How will that affect the relationship between Jon and Dany? Because you have to assume Dany hearing that news and seeing Jon as a threat to the Iron Throne, even though Jon is quote unquote the heir to the Iron Throne, the true heir, I guess. It's going to be interesting how she takes that news and how everyone takes that news, whether it's Dany, whether it's the North, because they know he's one of them, and whether, and then, of course, with the entire kingdom of the Southern Realm. So Okay. So continuing in Winterfell, we have a show in the Great Hall. This is where Alice Stark and Ned Umber are reintroduced to the show. Poor Ned Umber, sorry. Well, Under really right now.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, like they have a conversation, and this is where Tyrion says, about the Lannister army coming and just causing more strife within the North, of not trusting Southerners. And so it was a fine scene. It wasn't, I think, anything to talk about. I mean, this is where we get the line of and where I think Sansa, in this episode and throughout the past couple seasons has really turned into, I'm going to say this with kind of a grain of salt here, but has really turned into more of a Tyrion character than Tyrion. She is. I like the fact that she is being realistic, because I think a lot of the times in a lot of big shows we have just like a lot of plot holes, like realistic plot holes. It's like, oh, what the heck? Like, okay, I guess it works. And here she's saying, okay, we have, I've stored up the food for winter to last through even a long winter. But now we have two Dothraki army, we have a Unsullied army, and we have 2 dragons. How are we going to feed them all? What do even dragons eat? And then Danny's like, whatever they want, And Sansa, to me, like, has, I think, become one of the most interesting characters, because at this point in time, she is her mother, by all intents and purposes. And like her mother, Catelyn Stark, would even, like, in the earlier seasons, would always be the realistic one, whether she was talking to Robb or whether she was talking to Tyrion or Ned, even in the beginning of the episode where she's like, don't ride south, like nothing good happens when Northerners go south. Yeah, she is that person now, and I really, really do enjoy her character a lot, which is interesting because I didn't before.
It's funny because I was sitting there thinking, like, she brings up the whole point of the, like, oh, I saved up all this food, now it's not going to be able to, which is smart, like she did the right thing. But then on the other hand, I was like, it's sort of irrelevant, because if you either need it to feed the army to keep everyone alive, and then at that point you can figure out how you're going to feed yourselves,
right? I mean, I think that's the thing.
Or you all just die.
Right. That's and no one gets. Yeah, that's basically the big thing of the entire show right now. All right, let me just run through this last couple, and then we'll move to the next scene. Gendry unloading dragonglass. So we get the first time we see the dragonglass, which is cool. There's a lot of it, or maybe not a lot of it. I mean, we didn't really see the scope and scale of it.
Yeah, there's a couple carts.
Yeah, for sure. Sansa and Tyrion have a conversation up on the raft. I don't even know, on the balcony, I guess. Tyrion been taking a lot of L's the past couple seasons, which is, I think. How do you feel about what they are doing with Tyrion's character? It seems like they're, in the beginning he was the person who was the smartest, he was the cleverest, he was the person who was outsmarting everybody, and now it just seems like he can't catch a break, like with anything, And I don't know if they're setting up for him to die, but or even maybe have a redemption moment, but it seems like he's just not doing well on the show right now.
Well, and I think it was interesting, he had this conversation with Varys when they were in a little cart thing, making jokes about Varys's
lack of
yeah
parts, yeah.
Like, and I was sitting there thinking, like, they were at their peak when it was human versus human intrigue.
Yeah.
But as it sort of became more supernatural, I guess, for lack of a better word, of like dragons and the dead rising and like that sort of thing, like he's outside his comfort zone. He's not a warrior. You can't politic your way out of the Night King murdering you. And so I think he's sort of grasping at the air almost.
Yeah. Because
it's now in the realm of dragons burning down armies and Jon and Jaime swinging swords. Like, it's that sort of a scenario, and he's outside of his comfort zone. So I think in that sense it makes it fits, because he's almost an observer now. He's not going to change anything at this point. I think you can criticize him for sort of taking Cersei, a notoriously unreliable character at her word, all because he thinks that she's pregnant, and has, quote, something to live for. But at the end of the day, I think that's like the only thing he's got going for him right now.
Yeah, it's tough to see Tyrion in this way because we're so used to Tyrion being just a person of just someone who is going to hatch the best plan, and his plans haven't been great. I mean, we go all the way back to season 5 when Daenerys was in the Vasto Thrak, and he ended up basically almost losing Marine in many different ways to the Sons of Harpy, and then we have last season when they invaded Castle Rock, and he was wrong there. It's tough, man. Like, I hope they do. Tyrion has always been one of my favorite characters in the show, along with, I mean, a lot of people can agree with that, and I'm just hoping that his end. I hope he comes back to form. I hope he doesn't meet his end before that. You know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it depends on how episode 3 turns out with the Battle of Winterfell, of like which direction the show goes at that point.
Like, yeah, yeah.
Because if it goes back to being the North versus Cersei, then I think that's where he can kind of play a bit more. But yeah, I mean, it would be a little bit of a letdown if this is kind of
this is the downfall.
If that's how his story finishes, is basically just getting murked up in Winterfell by the Night King.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're rooting for you, Tyrion. Okay, and then Arya and Jon have a reunion. Arya goes up to Jon very secretly, just like my wife always goes up to me and scares me. And when we're in the house, I'm telling you, Max, my wife is the most silent walker in all of Earth, man. Like, last night I was watching the episode, and I was literally at the scene of in Last Hearth when
with Ned Umber,
with not even with Ned Umber, before that, when oh my goodness, Beric and Tormund were hearing noises and there was footsteps coming to them, and I kid you not, I had my headphones on so I couldn't hear anything behind me, and my wife was trying to get my attention by clapping, and it finally like got silent right before they were about to like scream at each other. And I heard a noise behind me, and I yelled so loud at like 3 in the morning. It was Anyway, same thing with Arya. So Arya comes up to Jon, says, "You used to be taller." And Jon asks, "How did you sneak up on me?" And Arya asks the question, "How did you survive a knife to the heart?" And he says, "I didn't." They end up comparing swords, which is, I think, such an awesome moment. Bringing back Needle when Jon in a very early episode of season 1. Gave that sword and had that sword made for Arya. He asked Arya, "Did you ever use it?" She goes, "Once or twice." Kind of calling back to the many times she's used it, and who she is today. Arya officially kind of branding as Team Sansa, Team Starks, Team North, and Jon saying, "I'm also a part of this family," and she's like, remember that. And which is interesting because obviously he is, but he also isn't. Any last thoughts about Winterfell and kind of the entire sequence there? Anything I just said?
No, I mean, I think we covered it, and it was nice to see the reunion of all the Stark children. I think it would have been one of the first time all the surviving members have been in the same location since episode 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So it's cool to have them, what's left of them, both physically, and then you've got Bran off being a weirdo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was cool. It was nice to see them all, and if nothing else, I think from if not all of them survive this series or the next couple episodes, they at least had that last reunion, so it was cool.
Sure. Yep. Like it for sure. All right. Okay. Play the clip. All right. Here we go. Where is it at? Yeah, here it is.
Your Grace, I'm afraid I bring terrible news. The dead have broken through the wall. Good.
Okay, that leads us to King's Landing. Of course, we have Qyburn, King of the Queen, Hand of the Queen coming up to Cersei, telling her that the dead have broken through the wall and they are marching south. And she says good, which is, I think she thinks that she has a plan, and I don't think that plan is going to go well. Yeah, we end up being with her, and then we of course meet the Golden Company for the first time. And this is where I'm going to, Max, go to your expertise. For those who are just show watchers, who are the Golden Company?
Yeah, so the so a little bit of backstory is that in Westeros, I think the idea of mercenaries is relatively foreign. You have the houses that are able to, primarily because the cities aren't free like they are in Essos.
Yeah.
So each house is able to raise its own army via its lands and all that kind of stuff. And then in the East, they have the free cities, so there's a lot more mercenaries. And so you have the books have a ton of them. We've saw some of them with.
I also have notes in my show notes. If you want to go to that.
What?
I said I also have notes in the show notes if you want to go to that. But
do your thing. Yeah, I see him now. We had Dario was the leader of one, but like the notes say, they were pretty hodgepodge. It's just sort of, hey, I can make a few bucks being a soldier. And then you have the second sons, which are established as like they're almost like the Blackwater of Essos, of like it's this very militarized, very well run, very expensive private army. And I think the threads for this were started either last season or even the season before, where Cersei makes a deal with the Iron Bank to get a literal boatload of money to go pay for them, and bring them over to help swell the ranks of the Lannister armies, and especially now that a lot of the other houses seem to, if they're not an open rebellion, they're not mustering for her, and after fighting with the North and the Mother of Thorns. I just totally blanked on their name.
Oh, the Tyrells. The Tyrells.
Yeah, the Tyrells. Yeah. They're probably a little bit depleted. And so she went and got them, which is ironic too. The Lannisters, Golden Company, all about their gold. But and then they came over and led by, I think in the show, his name is Captain Strickland, which for some reason it was just cracking me up, because it's just this total blonde guy, but it sounded like he had an Italian accent and had just the most
generic
British UK name of like Scotland, and it was throwing me off. But Euron, it confirmed that when Euron quote unquote fled from the dragon pit last season in fear, he was actually it was all a ruse so that he could go get the Golden Company and bring them over, missing the elephants, as Cersei complains multiple times.
As a book reader, I'm wondering if, or as a show watcher, for the people who are book readers, I'm wondering if this is a very, I think, cool moment for a lot of the books. It's because Max, I want to go back to you. Like, how do you feel like, because how many books have you read?
I have read up to what's been released. I have not read any of the Winds of Winter chapters that have been released.
Okay.
I know some people have. I think there's like 6 out there right now.
You're pretty much caught up mostly with the books?
Yeah.
Okay. So like the question I wanted to ask you as a book reader is like, how did you feel when you see something in the book come to life on screen? Like especially in the earlier seasons, I'm sure, like with even like the Red Wedding and John dying, right? That's in the books too.
Yeah, that's actually where the books have finished.
Yeah,
is that he was just getting shanked. I mean, it's always cool. Like I think, your mind's eye sort of makes a vision of what you think things look like, and it's always interesting to see how that translates kind of to the screen and how somebody else imagines it. Because in one example I always think of is that in the books, the Kingsguard are in like pure white armor.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I didn't know that. That's cool.
But in the show, I guess they did it was actually a practical issue, is that they did a test screening, and they just didn't look right. Like they just looked like these white blobs on screen. And so that's why they have the kind of more like a pale gold.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's cool. I think it's always interesting to see. You know, and they've definitely streamlined a lot of the Essos stuff. I think it's a little. I think the books get a little bogged down in that area, especially with Dance with Dragons. That's where most of the storyline takes place, and it's just sort of there's a lot of one-off cities and a lot of different dynamics, and so it can kind of I think the show's done a pretty good job of sort of condensing it down, making it a little bit more coherent.
Yeah, I just think it's really cool to see the Golden Army finally on screen. Okay, so we have Euron bringing the Golden Company, known for the golden armor, obviously. We have Captain Strickland, which we've talked about, which is just I'm Captain Strickland. Like, what? Like that name doesn't make any sense in this world. I don't know. Then we cut to them talking on the throne with with Captain Strickland kind of flexing that they have 20,000 men, no elephants, obviously. We have a scene with Yara, which is cool, just to kind of show us that Yara is indeed still alive, still kicking. And then we have, of course, the conversation between Euron and Cersei, with Euron finally completing his goal, asking for a Yelp review on his performance, and has the line, "I'm going to put a prince in your belly," which is very interesting because we know that she is indeed already pregnant from season 7 when she told Jaime that she was
that's
pregnant.
what she claims.
Or that's what yeah. Oh, yeah, that is true, actually. Yeah. You're right. And so, I honestly thought, it was interesting between the fact of that Cersei at this point, I think, is willing to do whatever it takes, to quote a certain Avengers Marvel movie, to get her plan done. And I think she knows, or she feels that Euron might be slipping in a lot of different ways, and that's why I think she does accept him finally. But I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on the whole sequence there?
It is a tie, I think, between her and Sansa for the most Machiavellian character in the show.
Yeah.
I think maybe the win goes to Cersei just because she also has just an absolute brutal streak to her that I don't think we've seen from Sansa yet. But yeah, it was just go back to the Golden Company. It dawned on me. I was like, the two main contenders right now are all reliant on effectively third-party armies to support their claims.
You're right. Yeah.
You got Cersei with her Golden Company, plus the Lannister army, and then you've got Daenerys with the Unsullied Dothraki, and then what's left of the Northern soldiers. So it's kind of funny that like the Westeros has become so torn down from months or years of war between the different houses that they're just trying to bring in whatever free agents they can to kind of continue to support their fights.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's a really great point that you brought up. I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, no, back to Cersei. Yeah, like I think she's just like you said, she is willing and has shown that she will do whatever it takes to win. And I don't think I think if she has to kill Jaime, she would. I think, assuming she is pregnant, taking her at her word, which I think is probably a mistake for viewers. I think the only person that she would not sacrifice would be her children.
Do you think she's pregnant? Like you mentioned before, that she allegedly says she's pregnant. Now, I wanted to go back to that. Like, it seems like you might not believe her, but also, like, what's the motive for telling that she is pregnant?
So, I mean, I think I see it in your notes, and so I'll give you the credit for it. Is that like we do know that she stopped drinking wine last season, but we do see her drinking wine this season. So I don't know if if Westeros is all up on the latest alcohol syndrome research.
I don't think they are, but I don't think they can just go to Wikipedia or Google and just say, "Hey, should I be drinking wine during my pregnancy?" I think if we go back to just like olden times, like people drank when they're pregnant. They didn't know, obviously.
Or like in the 50s when doctors said smoking was good for you.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, that's hard for me to kind of take. Like if we're being really realistic, like that may not be any sort of a clue. I'm only skeptical just because we saw a very blatant example of her in sort of two actions lying to the Northern Alliance about the reasons or her justification for or motivation for getting involved with the Army of the Dead. And so she's smart enough that I feel like she would know what levers to pull to get people to do what she wants. And so I think she knows, for Tyrion and for Jaime to kind of plant that seed of, oh, I'm pregnant, and them knowing what she would do for their children.
Yeah.
It just leads me to think that it's hard to take her at her word. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is that there was a apparent, and this is just in more fan theory crafting than anything, that she apparently, there was supposed to be a scene where she had a miscarriage, but my understanding was that was supposed to be at the end of season 7. So that didn't happen. So either it was filmed and scrapped, or they are saving that for a different part. But
Interesting, yeah.
I don't know. I part of me thinks like my own just personal hopes for the show is like I almost don't want it to be a plot point.
Okay.
I just don't necessarily know if it adds a ton. Like I think she's villainous enough without like this anything with children going on like with her. Like sometimes why can't it could, for me it could be really simple that she's just ambitious enough, get that out of my mouth, to just want to be queen.
Yeah, sure. It'll be interesting to see what happens with her. Okay, so that leads us to Bronn. A scene with Bronn. Bronn gets interrupted again. I think it's sort of a show inside joke where he really can't get what he needs to get done. Harkening back to when Podrick in season, I think it was season 4 or season 5, interrupts him and he's like, "I need you to get out now."
Yeah, and it was funny because I think it's somewhat of an early criticism with earlier seasons is that there was the nudity and sex got a little gratuitous. It personally doesn't like, I'm not offended by it or anything like that, but I almost wonder if there was a little bit of an inside joke of the phrase that was coined of sexposition, particularly with Littlefinger's brothel being like a commonplace. I wonder if the show writers were being very intentional about throwing that in there.
I mean, in an episode where I think they had a lot of callbacks to earlier seasons, I think this was definitely a callback in terms of, because they definitely like cut it down, I guess, in the past couple seasons. I don't think we've seen a lot of gratuitous nudity since like season 3, season 4, maybe even. And so this was another, I think, callback to earlier seasons, which was interesting. Yeah. All right, so Joffrey Baratheon's crossbow returns in this episode. The new crossbow he received at the wedding, which is very intricate and detailed, proper in real life. Tyrion later reused it to kill Tywin, of course, in the very famous episode, and it is the reason is given that Cersei thinks it'd be poetic justice, of course, to kill Tyrion with it. So yeah, like basically, we have Bronn being visited by Qyburn. Qyburn mentions that he thought he was going to die as an old, lonely man until he served Cersei, and Cersei made him Hand of the Queen. What would she do for the person who kills her traitorous brothers? And so he's like, this effing family, like, and I don't know if he, and he also mentions that he used to have a castle and used to have a wife and I think he was very content. I even going back to when Jaime approaches him to go to Dorne, with his castle and with his wife, and or with his, I don't even think his wife, his betrothed. I think he was betrothed at that point. And he says they took it all away, and he, Qyburn says no, that was Jaime. And so like I don't know if I believe, like, I guess it depends who you think the true Bronn is. Do we think he's just a sellsword? Because and if you think he's just doing it for the lands, for the money, for the gold, or do you think he's actually a good character who is supposedly Tyrion and Jaime's basically best friend or friend? You know, it's who you think Bronn really is. I want to lean towards Bronn being a good guy and he's going to end up going to the north. He's going to end up confronting Jaime and Tyrion, and I think he's going to end up shooting like at their feet and throwing the crossbow down and say, "This is what your sister wanted me to do. Like, I'm not going to do this. What's up, boys?" You know, and having an awesome reunion there with all three of them. But at the same time, it's like the show has told us that Bronn is always chasing the gold, always chasing the money, always chasing the lands and the titles and the castles, quote unquote. I don't know, like, what do you think eventually happens with Bronn?
That's a good question. I think, yeah, if anything, the show has taught us that assuming characters will do the right thing or the best thing is a mistake. But I do lean towards your thinking where it's like, I don't think we've really seen Bronn be the sort of person that would just do it.
Yeah.
Like, and part of me thinks that what's his incentive because if he goes north, which I think is what the implication was, is that he's going to head north to Winterfell to go assassinate them.
Mm-hmm.
By the time he gets there, like if he sees, he's either going to, the way the plot's going to work is he's either going to get there and see the army of the dead and be like, oh hell no.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Was
and
Bronn...
be like,
Go ahead.
Oh no. So in real life, because he and Lena Headey, who plays Cersei, they contractually do not want to ever be in the same scene together because they had a very nasty breakup.
No way.
So he was not in the Dragon Pit. He was off with Podrick.
Okay, that's right. He goes, "Oh, let's let these people talk and let's get a drink, Podrick." Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah.
That.
So I don't remember off the top of my head if he's ever kind of seen the dead with his own eyes. But you know, I think just the whole enticement of getting a castle and gold and all that only really matters if you're going to be alive to enjoy it. And if he sees that army, then like why would you kill? You know, Tyrion. I don't know. You're like, maybe it's just just enjoying him as a person. But you know, Jaime, like, why would you kill one of the best swordsmen, who's trying to keep the Seven Kingdoms alive? So, you know, I feel like it is something where he is gonna get there and just be like, no, I'm good, and probably turn and help fight. And then maybe, you know, something else happens. But I think that there's also the other end result where if you go with like the super dark timeline where everyone gets killed in Winterfell, then what's the point there too? Then he doesn't have to do anything.
Sure. Yeah. That's actually a really great point that you bring up in terms of he's going to get to Winterfell, I think, and he's going to end up seeing the Army of the Dead at some point, and he's going to end up coming to, you know, an aha moment of like, should probably help these people out or just run away, one or the other, you know? And so we'll see what happens with him.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
That
was
like
your
dog
keys.
Listening in.
Sounds like your keys or something like that. I didn't know what that was.
Let me take the car off.
Euron. We get to Euron ships. Of course, we have the famous Yara Greyjoy army. What's left of her little band of Greyjoys.
It's like a little squad at this point.
Well, basically, I mean, they're Navy SEAL Team 6 at this point. You know, cutting down, you know, the Euron's people on that ship very easily. I would say, very fast. I think it's a huge harkening to what the show is now, you know, having to do things quickly. But anyway, I wanted to read a couple notes because I thought these are interesting about Euron and kind of the Greyjoys. It's vaguely implied in sample characters from the 6th novel that Euron Greyjoy will try to seize the Iron Throne by making a marriage alliance with Cersei Lannister. But in a vague prophetic vision in which Euron is seated on the Iron Throne with a woman next to him, but whether the woman is actually Cersei is unconfirmed in the books. When Euron is first introduced in Season 6, his brother Balon did remark that Euron had torn out the tongues of every member of his crew, detailed from the books, and why his ship is named the Silence. Euron brings up the mute status again in this episode. Actually, script notes for Euron's attack on Yara's fleet in Season 7 did reiterate his crew were all mute. So that's what he was talking about when he was saying to Yara, if I killed you, who would I have? Who would I be able to talk to? So there you go. Here's also the cameo I was talking about earlier. The first of Euron's crew to be killed in the sneak attack, impaled through the head, but from behind with an arrow coming out of his left eye. A lot of eyes. F's in chat to a lot of the eyes of that crew for sure. There's a cameo by comedian Rob McClenney?
Yeah, it's Mac.
Yeah, best known for playing Ronald Mac McDonald in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. One of the other guards was also made a cameo by the comedian Martin Starr of Freaks and Geeks, Knocked Up, and Silicon Valley. So I thought that was a really awesome.
Guilfoyle.
Yeah.
I didn't even recognize him.
Go back and watch it. You'll see. The last of the guards is killed on Euron's ship as Theon drives an axe into his head. It was also a cameo by episode's own Dave Hill, who played one of the guards being axed in the head by Theon Greyjoy. That's cool, right? Like, that's really cool. Theon,
imagine writing into the script, I take an axe to the head.
Right, exactly. Theon's men sneak onto the ship using bows and arrows to quietly kill the crew, and Theon uses an axe. In the books, Ramsay Snow actually cuts off his index and middle finger from one hand and his pinky from the other, making it impossible for him to use a bow again, therefore probably using the axe. The TV show only depicted him losing a pinky finger, probably because it would have been difficult to digitally remove the actor's fingers from many shots. Whatever the case, his use of the axe instead of a bow may be a nod towards this. Went to sleep, which is annoying. Okay. Last but not least, Yara Greyjoy says the bulk of the Ironborn forces are loyal to Euron, deployed east of King's Landing. It will be now easier for them to retake the Iron Island themselves. This doesn't take into account that most of the Iron Fleet loyal to her were destroyed in Euron's surprise attack last season, but it is still plausible. In the books, the drowned men, priests of the Ironborn, loathe Euron for being ungodly and dishonorable man, even by Ironborn standards, which is pretty low. It is implied that they may lead a general uprising against him in the home islands while they are leading his offensive back east. Yara is still in the north as of the most current novel, but develops hopes that she can ally with the drowned men to have Euron's Kingsmote election declared invalid. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about kind of SEAL Team 6 and Euron. Or there was one note that I didn't put in. It's that we talked about it a little bit about it earlier, Max, when Yara and Theon have a conversation, and she tells him that they're going to need a spot for them to go in case the North falls, aka the Iron Islands are going to take it back. And she goes up to Theon. She says, "You want to go north and fight for the Starks?" And he says, "Yeah, I do." And she goes, "Okay, go." And I think it's really cool to see Theon, I think, going back to Winterfell, which will be really cool, just because that's basically where he was raised. In all intents and purposes, he is a Stark. He was raised in the Stark as a Stark, as one of the boys, and she says the famous line of the Greyjoys, "What is dead may never die, but kill the bastards anyway." So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there, for sure.
Yeah, and really my only question there is if this is writing out Yara's character for the rest of the series, or if she's going to return at some point in the future. The only thing that makes me wonder if she will return is that the show writers did say that they released a Spotify playlist that's like quote unquote inspired by.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of references to like ships sinking, burning, like a sort of nautical stuff. And so, it is interesting to wonder, or if this was if it was a farewell, and she really is just trying to go put the Iron Isles back together after it's sort of been ravaged by Euron's antics.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, it was cool. I mean, it'll be nice again to see Theon. I think he and Jaime have had a multi-season long redemption arc, and so it'll be interesting to see. Like, I don't think he'll ever completely atone for what he's done.
Yeah.
But which makes me think that he will be one of the people to die. Is that sort of that final washing of sins for his character, but. Particularly if it's to save a Stark. But it'll be interesting. I think he's gone from completely unlikable to pitiful to sort of where you're seeing, like, I can see he's trying to be a better person.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I feel like a lot of people aren't on Theon's side in terms of like who, like if he died tomorrow, like would we really care? You know, like I don't know. I guess it depends how he dies, but I'm not there, like personally. All right, let's get to riding dragons.
You've completely ruined horses for me.
We could stay 1,000 years. No one would find us.
We'd be pretty old. It's cold up here for a southern girl.
So keep your queen warm.
Okay. Yeah, Max, let's ride some dragons, man.
And we called it. I mentioned it on the Monday show, but we called it that in our season 8 preview that we were like, this looks like a dragon riding scene.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they must have done a pass when they were rendering out the episode where they weren't on there. And yeah, I mean, I would say I thought the scene was little.
We talked about
cringy.
this in our spoiler-free review, like but we don't have to talk. I feel like we shouldn't talk about this too much more, but yeah. Go ahead, Max. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we did cover it mostly. I mean, I thought it was just sort of, I get what they were trying to do, but I think it landed a little flat with the dragon riding and kind of the gravity of what the situation really was, and then kind of how the show portrayed it. And I did notice on one of the Game of Thrones subreddits that I guess a line was cut where John actually kind of mentions, he's like, it felt like he knew what I wanted to do, referring to the dragon, which I guess was supposed to be more foreshadowing that that he has Targaryen blood. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it felt a little campy. It felt like, I think they're trying to, what I think the show writers were trying to do was show obviously Jon's connection as a Targaryen, but also kind of the way that he and Dany are trying to keep their sort of fling a little secret.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, by the way, because I feel like a lot of people don't know about Jon and Dany, except for, I mean, Tyrion obviously knows. I mean, he saw them. I don't saw them going.
Well, and Sansa called him out on it too.
Sansa
I think.
did call him out.
Or maybe it was a preview for next week's episode. I don't remember.
Well, we also have the conversation I brought her up earlier. Is like there was a conversation between it was Varys, Tyrion, and oh man, his name is escaping me.
Oh my
Knight,
god!
the
Of
Onion
course,
Knight,
Davos.
Of them talking about a future proposal, a future wedding, or and I was like, okay, they might not know, but I feel like a lot of people do know, so it's interesting to see that.
Yeah, it seems to be. I think it's hard to hide when they're both
always together,
cuddling up next. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it was. I if they had cut that scene, I wouldn't have necessarily minded.
Sure.
I think the only thing that was, and I didn't notice it at first, but you kind of, especially with the whole theme of constantly calling back to older episodes, is that Daenerys's line is almost like word for word the same as what
Ygritte was.
Ygritte said.
Yeah.
About just staying in a cave and all that kind of stuff, which is sort of interesting, the second time.
Jon likes caves. What can he say? A man likes what he likes. All right, so we get to the next scene. Well, only a couple more scenes left, so hang in there, guys. Arya, Hound, and Gendry reunion. We have, of course, Gendry being kind of the main smith of leading the forge to make the dragonglass weapons. And so sometimes we see spears, we see arrows. For the Hound, he created this axe, kind of flexing that he's a pretty good smith, that he was able to do an axe, which is kind of interesting because I think dragonglass, if I'm not mistaken, is basically just like a rock material, maybe even glassy at some point. So it's like, how long is that axe gonna last if he's like cutting down like thousands of White Walkers,
Yeah, it's a little interesting because I had that same thought because they kind of show it as like the shards earlier in the carts, and then there's like an axe made out of it. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So I think they're taking a little bit of liberties of it looks like obsidian, but I think it's supposed to be a bit more
Magical.
maybe a bit more alien, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I have a note in here. In the novels, only fire can kill the whites. Dragonglass has no special effect on them. Is that true?
I don't remember.
Okay.
It's hard because I'm probably mixing up the show and the books. I don't remember because I know Valyrian steel. That's the one that does it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, actually, I don't remember.
Yeah. That's what I have in my notes. So that's an interesting fact that I thought from the book. Last but not least, Gendry has not seen Arya since season 3, making their long-awaited reunion very special for a lot of fans. And of course, makes a nod to earlier banter by formally referring to her as Lady Stark and My Lady, as he was shocked when he first found out she was a Highborn back in season 3. So that was a cool nod as well. And there was a lot of flirtatious conversation going on between them. I remember watching the episode last night, and I was like, "Ooh, they're like looking at each other in a very, very interesting way." So
Yeah.
I think the show is telling us like that they're bound to be together in the end.
Well, and a funny another callback to episode 1 where Robert and Ned are in the crypts, and Robert suggests, "I have a son, and Ned, you have a daughter.
Yeah.
And let's join our houses." And,
Yeah.
and even though Gendry would only be he'd only be half.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be
still
an
Baratheon.
interesting way to kind of
Very cool.
link all those houses together. Basically the two most feuding houses, and then the Starks, who are kind of seem to be in the middle of it all.
This is why you listen to Ice and Firecast for awesome takes like that. That is so good. That is so good. I didn't see the connection there. Good job. Okay, so then we have a conversation between Jon and Sansa. House Glover is not going to be coming to join the fight because they basically they were saying like, we follow the King of the North, and you're no longer King of the North. Then later,
Basically, they're a bunch of punks. Is
yeah,
what it
basically. I mean, basically. Jon explaining, Dany not being her father, that she is going to be good queen. Sansa questions Jon again, kind of reiterating the fact that she doesn't quite trust Dany just yet. And then we cut to Dany and Sam. Dany thanking Sam for healing Jorah. Sam explaining that he needs a pardon from his family, basically for not only stealing a bunch of books from the Citadel, but also stealing. What is the name of the sword? Anyone?
Oh,
it's escaping me. Oh man. Okay, this is also why you don't listen to this podcast as well, because we forget the sword's name. Anyway, stealing the family sword, the Valyrian steel sword, and this is when she makes the connection that Heartsbane. That's right. Making the connection that Sam is a Tarly, breaking the news to Sam, which we've talked about quite extensively in our review episode. So it's just a tough situation, I think. And I think this is where we said this in the review episode. I think this is where Sam realizes that, okay, Dany might not be the best for the job, because I know the fact that Jon is the true heir to the Iron Throne. And then
the only thing that I think it changes is just the reason, or maybe the motivation for why or how he tells Jon. Because obviously we know in season 7 he and Bran knew, but the way that this prompts him to, instead of being like, hey, you need to know this, it becomes a, hey, you need to know this, and he's sort of prodding him to sort of assert himself to claim his claim, so to speak. So it just kind of changes the dynamic of why he told him the way he did.
Definitely. All right, last clip of the day. Max, you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
Put your seatbelts on. This is a good one.
You hiding from me?
Of course not.
What are you doing in Winterfell? Or did you read every book in the Citadel already? What's wrong? Gilly? You alright? Little son? No. No what? Daenerys. She executed my father and brother. They were prisoners. She didn't tell you. So sorry. Need to end this war. Would you have done it? I've executed men who disobeyed me. You've also spared men. Thousands of wildlings when they refused to kneel. I wasn't a king. But you were. You've always been. Gave up my crown, Sam. Bent the knee. I'm not king in the north anymore.
I'm not talking about the king in the north. I'm talking about the king of the bloody Seven Kingdoms.
Bran and I worked it out. I had a High Septon's diary. Bran had whatever Bran has. What are you talking about? Your mother was Lyanna Stark. And your father, the real father, Rhaegar Targaryen. You've never been a bastard. You are Aegon Targaryen, true heir to the Iron Throne. I'm sorry. I know it's a lot to take in. My father was the most honorable man I ever met. He lied to me all my life. Your father, Ned Stark, promised your mother he'd always protect you. And he did. Robert would have murdered you if he knew. You're the true king. Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, protector of the realm, all of it. Daenerys is our queen. She shouldn't be. It's treason. It's the truth. You gave up your crown to save your people. Would she do the same?
Okay, there you go. And we have Sam having a conversation with Jon, telling him the news of his true heritage, him being Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark in a marriage, in their, Rhaegar's marriage to Lyanna, therefore making him not a bastard, and therefore making him the true heir to the Iron Throne. We talked about a little bit about it. We talked a lot about, actually not even a little, we talked a lot about it in a review episode. We talked a lot about it in the very beginning of this episode. It's going to be interesting. I think the one big question is it's going to be very interesting how everyone takes the news, including Dany, including the North, and what Jon is going to do with all of that information.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, in some respects, it's probably one of the questions that we've been asking since the very first episode of of who John's parents are, and
the books too. The question for all
yeah.
the book readers as well.
Yeah, there's just as an aside, there's an interesting article on it was either Polygon or Vox, I think.
Yeah.
That they actually did a little research into like where the theory first started. They're like, when did it come up? And it was like in the early 90s when the book first came out. People were immediately guessing. They're like, hey, I think these two are
nice.
But yeah, so I mean, I think in some respects it was, obviously since we knew last season. So I think really the question was if Jon would find out. And I was very much hoping that he would, so that it wasn't one of those like, oh, he gets killed and he never knows his true fate, like that sort of a thing. Like,
right.
I think it'd be bad. But yeah, really, I think it sets up the next couple of episodes of how that plays out. And I think based on some of the previews we got for this week's episode, it seems as if that's going to get discussed
for sure,
based on the scene of he and Dany hanging out in the crypts.
I mean, personally, I'm glad that they got it out of the way in episode 1, just because we only have 6 episodes total, one of them gone. I think in order to have the full scope of the repercussions of this news, they had to do it pretty quite early. Like I didn't want, like you, I didn't want them going into the battle for Winterfell with that unanswered questions of, does Jon really know who he is? So I'm glad, and now it sets it up, like you were saying, for the next couple episodes at least, or for the next episode definitely, of everyone I think finding out, and I think everyone will find out, which we'll talk about later in the episode. That leads us to our last scene, which is in Last Hearth. We have the famous line of Dolores, Ed, and Tormund coming together, and Dolores Ed goes, "He's got blue eyes," and Tormund saying the very famous line at this point, "I've always had blue eyes," which was just an awesome comedic relief moment. I loved it so much. All right, Last Hearth is mentioned in dialogue in season 1, but appears on screen for the first time briefly in this episode. It is the famously closest castle seat to the wall. That is the most motherly normal castle of the Lordship, not including the castles of the Night's Watch and the castles itself. While little remains of the Night's Watch may no longer exist as a formal organization at this point, obviously I think their numbers were gutted after Thorin's rebellion at the beginning of season 6. Jon Snow re-garrisons the castles using the wildlings, who did not join the Watch. Dolores Ed was simply left in charge of acting Lord Commander because few men were left. For years beforehand, the declining number of the Watch meant that they were only manned 3 out of the 19 castles on the wall anymore. Castle Black, East Watch by the Sea, and the Shadow Tower on the western end. In this episode, Jon cites that there really isn't a reason to defend the castles after a massive breach at the eastern end of the wall, so he sends a message to the remaining garrisons to abandon them and fall back to Winterfell. The few survivors of the attack on each watch then run into Dolores Ed and retreating garrison from Castle Black when they both reach the Last Hearth. Presumably, the garrison from the Shadow Tower and any others Jon recently stationed men at retreated south as well. Last but not least, the burning of Ned Umber White was done entirely with practical effects, not CGI, which is actually really cool. When it came time to burn him, stuntman Paul Lowe took his place wearing a full head of prosthetic mask to resemble the white-turned main actor. Lowe was then covered in flame-resistant gel, was set on fire, and all the whites thrashing while on the fly was really performed. And then soon as the shot ended, stagehands rushed to extinguish him. And then we have we'll kind of combine these two scenes since we're ending pretty soon. And then the very last scene, Jaime arrives at Winterfell. An old friend who hasn't moved an inch comes to meet him at the gates, Brandon Stark. So going back to Last Hearth, I mean, we talked about that one in our review episode as well, so go back to that. Kind of a cool moment, them coming together. We, of course, have the message of the Night King, which we've seen multiple times at this point. I know you've been wanting to talk about it, so go ahead, talk about it, Max.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, and I just saw an article last night that the writer of the episode sort of confirmed some, I think, what most people knew, but that the symbol was almost like a sarcastic symbol by the Night King to kind of put the spiral cyclone kind of design up on the wall with Ned Umber in the middle of it as a reference back to when he was sacrificed by the children of the forest against the First Men. And so that's that. But then I think I was looking, and I'm not the only one who's noticed it, but that it looks extremely similar to the Targaryen sigil, which is the 3 dragon heads, and then the tails make that same spiral. So, I think the question is, are they going to throw in that major of a reveal this late in the game, of like the Night King's actually a Targaryen, which I think chronologically wouldn't necessarily make sense. Because I don't remember if this was before or after the fall of Valyria. Either way, I think that's probably a bit of a stretch, but it would be interesting. I'd be interested to see how that plays out, that if somehow the Night King turns out to be related to the Targaryen dynasty in some way. But yeah, I think, the only other thing that stuck out to me was just the recalling of the Night's Watch. Is like, the wall had been this thing that's lasted for millennia, and now it's effectively useless, and the army of the dead's marching around, and so the Night's Watch are like, cool, now what?
Time to go south for sure.
Yeah.
Jamie arriving to Winterfell, I thought it was a really cool moment. I mean, we talked about this a little bit in the review, or in the instant take review, but just the moment of him coming back to the place where it all started, and then seeing the boy he pushed out the window, which basically started everything, in my opinion.
And he's got a lot of pissed off people.
And he's got a lot of pissed off people, which we'll see.
It didn't really dawn on me until after. I was like, God, there's nobody there that likes him.
Yeah, he's by himself.
And we saw in the previews for next week's episode that he seems to be hauled before both the Starks and Daenerys. So I think really the question... No, I think it was effectively confirmed via the trailers that he survives next week's episode because we see him in the battle for Winterfell. But it'll be interesting to see if it's sort of like you live to fight, and if you survive the battle, then we'll deal with you later kind of a situation. Sure. Or if it is sort of like, bygones be bygones.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think that's the interesting thing about next episode or one of the interesting thing that'll happen is what, I mean, we know that Jamie survives, but it'll be how he survives, whether it'll be him, pleading his reasons for killing the Night King or the Mad King, or if someone comes to his aid, like Brienne. It'll be interesting to see. And that's it for the episode. Next segment, real quick. I call it the R remembers Railroad. My nickname for George R. R. Martin is George Railroad Martin. But this segment is called Railroad Remembers, which harkens back to a lot of the books. For my book readers, this episode contains influences from the chapter of Dance with Dragons. In Chapter 61, Griffin Reborn, the Golden Company arrives at Westeros. Harry Strickland comments that the elephants have not been brought. This episode contains influence from the chapter of Winds of Winter, The Forsaken, where it talks about a Greyjoy is held captive on Euron's ship, taunted by his captor. The captive finally tells Euron to kill him, but Euron refuses. It's not known if that person is Yara. I don't think Yara does not exist in the books, correct?
Not by that name.
Not by that name, okay. All right, last segment of the day to end the show. 5 for 5. Ned Stark Award, basically. Who is the biggest winner of the episode?
Ooh, biggest winner.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
I mean, it's got to be Jon, right? Finding out, not only being able to bring the North, the reinforcements he's needed to fight the White Walker army, but also learning the fact that he is the true heir to the Iron Throne.
Yeah, I would agree that it's Jon. I think in the light of his end goal being to defeat the Night King, I think he got the most that he could have asked for at this point.
Stannis Baratheon Award is the biggest loser of the episode. So who do you think that is?
Ooh, great question. Who's yours? I
would probably have to say Tyrion, just because I don't think Tyrion has had a good scene in the past couple seasons. Like, he hasn't had his Blackwater moment in a long time. I just think what they're doing with that character is interesting, because I don't know if they're gonna have him be an important character moving forward. I don't know.
I'm gonna be a little bold, and I think Daenerys might have been the biggest loser.
That's a really good one, yeah.
Between the cold reception in Winterfell, and Jon's confirmation of Jon's lineage, I think her position's the weakest it's been, despite her armies.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. That's good. We have the Podrick Award, basically the most underrated. I'm going to say Sam. I thought Sam, that his name, John, what's his Sam's actor's name? John something. John.
Why did Bishop comes to mind?
Okay. That doesn't sound right. But anyway, the character, I mean, Sam, I think, is the most underrated this episode, just because he not only learns about his family, but then John Bradley. He not only learns about his family and what happens to his family, but has to do the brave thing of tell Jon who his parents are. And I thought his acting was phenomenal. I think we really underestimate just his, like, I never thought that he was that great of an actor, but after seeing this episode, it really cemented that, like, he's actually pretty good.
I'm kind of split. Like, on the one hand, I think in a pure practical level, I think it's Gendry, just because he's literally arming the people with the weapons to defeat the Whites. But I also go back to that wall discussion with Davos and Varys, that I kind of feel like, and Tyrion, that like they seem to have the most sensible which means it'll be promptly ignored. But the best idea of how to resolve the situation of instead of having of sort of inviting Jon to sort of share power.
Yeah, nice. We have the In Memoriam, which basically we only had one character who died off this time, which I'm sure won't be the last. Ned Umber promptly dies in this episode. Lord Ned Umber was the son of Small John Umber at the head of the House Umber after the death of his father at the Battle of the Bastards, who fought for House Bolton. He pledged to House Stark once more after being called upon by Jon Snow. He was killed and raised as a white before being burned by Beric Dondarrion. All right, 1 more minute left. Here we go. One big question you have, which we talked a little bit about earlier, but for me, it's got to be, how will Arya, how will Sansa, how will Bran, how will the Starks in the North take Jon being a Targaryen? Like, how will they take that news? That's like my biggest question, I think, for the next episode.
I think, I think Bran doesn't really care because he's sort of off in his own little world.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I think Arya would be largely indifferent as well, just because I don't think she really cares too much about the throne in that sense, as long as Cersei's dead. I think Sansa's the one that's the biggest wild card. It's just it's either another threat to the power that she's begun to consolidate, or it's a means for her to help further the Stark agenda.
Yeah, I think Sansa in a lot of ways represents the North and her interests, and it'll be interesting to see. I think the North is going to definitely see how she reacts to the news. Your big one question for last episode, or for the next episode.
For next episode, I think my big question is probably just the most obvious one of if does Dany find out, and if so, how does she react?
Yeah. Sure. Anything else about the episode that you want to mention, Max, before we end this thing?
No, I mean, I think we've discussed pretty much everything. It's a great setup. Looking forward to the next 2 episodes. I think next or this Sunday is probably the last one when we'll get we'll just be able to take a breath watching the show.
Yeah, sure.
And then, heading into the Battle of Winterfell, which I think, also this week's is the last normal length episode. Somebody on Free Folk, they measured episode length in Bobby B units.
Nice.
But yeah, I think from then on out they're long, and we'll probably make some huge lore jumps as we kind of crash into the finale.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This has been episode 20 of the Ice and Firecast, guys. If we missed anything else, or if you want to hear kind of, I think just like Benioff and Weiss, I think you got to listen to our instant take episode for many of the kind of things that we missed, and this one is more of an in-depth in terms of what we missed on that one. So I think they go two and two in hand. So if there's anything we're missing, guys, if you're like, hey, they didn't talk about this, it's probably in our instant take episode. So check that out. We're on iTunes, we're on Apple Podcast. I keep wanting to say iTunes, but that's not true. We're on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and please follow us on Twitter at the Ice and Firecast. This has been episode 20, guys. Thank you so much. You can follow me at Fortitude on Twitter, FOR7ITUDE. You can catch my live reactions and watch alongs to every single Game of Thrones episodes on twitch.tv/Fortitude, FOR7ITUDE again. You can follow Max at Maxwell Bennett on Twitter for the hottest Seahawks takes, I believe.
That's basically what my Twitter feed is.
Big news coming out of Seahawks land this week as well. Then the schedule's out too, which is fun. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week. I think, Max, you're not here. You're coming back on Monday, right?
Yeah, so no. So probably won't be able to do
Will you be
instant reactions,
okay.
But I hopefully, barring any sort of flight delays, should be back on Friday. So maybe we can do a Friday evening recap.
Perfect. All right, guys, we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you have a good rest of your day, and we'll catch you next week. Bye, guys.
See ya.